What's up everyone, Darcblade here with another guide to Monster Hunter Rise. In this video we're going to be showing off a pre-Sunbreak build, this time for the Hunting Horn. Now what is a pre-Sunbreak build? Well, it's an endgame Monster Hunter Rise build that we can take into the start of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak to take on the early Master Rank monsters relatively comfortably. Whilst these builds will be obviously replaced with Master Rank gear once we start getting our hands on it, it nonetheless gives us the best possible head start. Now before we get into the video, a reminder that if you enjoy these builds, consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, as we make builds for a variety of games that cater to a variety of playstyles. When it comes to the Hunting Horn, it's more than just a support weapon. It is a decent damage dealing weapon, made even more effective in Monster Hunter Rise thanks to the new additions available to it. And so if you're thinking of using the Hunting Horn at the start of Sunbreak, then I'd recommend going for a DPS build, as I'm going to be shown here with the Dragonheart DPS build. This build of course can be adapted depending on what songs you like to use on your Hunting Horn, and if you're playing in a group. But for the most part this is focusing mainly on solo play or for players who like to deal large amounts of damage with their horn. So for the Dragonheart build, you'll need the full Valstrax armor set, which includes the Valstrax helm, Valstrax mail, Valstrax braces, Valstrax coil, and the Valstrax greaves. For your petalace, this is down to personal preference. I'm using an absolute petalace for that extra bit of health. And then for your talisman, unfortunately the talismans, no one's going to have the same amount of talismans or the same types of talismans. But try to get a talisman with as much critical eye on it as possible. I've got a talisman with critical eye level 3, and then it has hunger resistance level 2, complete byproduct. It's not really needed on this build whatsoever, and then it has a tier 1 dual socket on it. You can of course use talismans that have more dual sockets if you don't have a talisman that has critical eye level 3, so there is a lot to play around with. Now as for the weapon, this all depends on what melodies you want. I am mainly going for Hunting Horns that have the Sonic Wave melody attached to it so we can deal some extra damage. Remember, Sonic Waves cannot crit, they're just an extra way of dealing extra damage to a monster when we actually play our songs. So if you're going the same route, I'd recommend either using the Rampage Hunting Horn or the Tigrex Hunting Horn. For the Rampage Hunting Horn I'm using here, I've got a Sharpness Type 3 Rampage skill, Non-Elemental Boost Rampage skill, and Attack Melody 2 Rampage skill attached to it. Like I said, if you are playing in a group and like to use different types of songs, there are lots of weapons out there. Each Hunting Horn could be considered unique in its own right due to the fact that they have different melodies attached to them, but I would still recommend going for a Hunting Horn that doesn't really require any handicraft, so you don't have to worry about sharpness too much. Now as for the decorations, you've got a few to play around with. So first of all, I've gone for critical jewels to max out crit boost, I've then gone for steadfast jewels to max out stun resistance, expert jewel to increase our critical eye, and then a sonorous jewel for a point in the Horn Maestro skill. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a build with a raw attack of 240, which can be up to 264 raw attack when the attack and affinity up melody is in effect. You'll have no element with a ton of blue sharpness, your 25% base affinity, which can be 45% affinity when you take into account the attack and affinity up melody. This can be 95% when you also take into account weakness exploit, and you'll have a strong defense of 581. That is exceedingly strong against Dragon but weak to the other elements, but when Dragonheart is in effect this won't matter, as all our resistances will become positive. When it comes to the switch skills, these, as I always say, are down to personal preference. I say it's down to personal preference, especially when it comes to Sunbreak, as the skill swap mechanic allows us to pretty much use the majority of switch skills in our arsenal. So when it comes to the skills, you have Critical Eye at level 5, increasing the base affinity of this build. You'll then have Dragonheart at level 5. Dragonheart is a skill that kicks in whenever we have 80% health or lower. When this occurs, we'll contract Dragon Blight. Dragon Blight normally nullifies any element we are using on a build or element, but as we're using a non-elemental build, this doesn't matter. But when we have Dragon Blight on our hunter, through the Dragonheart skill, all our resistances will be increased to 50, and on top of that we'll gain 10% raw attack. We'll also have Resentment at level 3, increasing our raw attack whenever we have a red portion of health on our health bar, and we'll have Resuscitate also at level 3. Resuscitate works exceedingly well in unison with Dragonheart, as whenever we have a blight on our hunter, such as Dragon Blight, provided by the Dragonheart skill, we'll gain even more raw attack, so they synergize well. We'll also have Critical Boost at level 3, increasing the damage of our critical hits, but this only applies to the raw portion of an attack, not the elemental or element portion. You'll then have Weakness Exploit at level 3. Weakness Exploit is a skill that increases our affinity whenever we're attacking monster weak points. Weakness Exploit at level 3 can provide us a bonus 50% extra affinity. You'll then have Stun Resistance at level 3, a quality of life skill that I personally like to use that prevents any stun effects on our hunter. You'll then have hunger resistance at level 2, a byproduct of the talisman I'm using. It's not really needed on this build, but extends the time until your stamina cap is reduced by 100%. And then finally you'll have Horn Maestro at level 1, which extends how long our melodies remain in effect. So as you can see, it is quite a simple DPS build in all honesty. Whilst I don't normally like to use the Valstrax armor sets, when it comes to the Hunting Horn and dealing damage, it's the best option. The fact that it can be combined with other hunting horns for different effects means that the weapon itself can dictate how the build functions. For example, if you're not comfortable with the Dragon Heart and having your health at a lower threshold for maximum DPS, you could use a hunting horn that has, say, Sonic Barrier or Divine Protection, adding to your survivability and allowing you to remain under that 80% more comfortably. There are a lot of options, but what I'm showing here is, for me, the build I enjoy the most with the hunting horn. But that all being said, every build out there has various pros and cons. No build is absolutely perfect. When it comes to this Pre-Sunbreak Hunting Horn build, its biggest pro is its damage output. Thanks to its high affinity, Dragonheart Resentment, Resuscitate, Crit Boost and Weakness Exploit, we're able to deal large amounts of damage to our monsters and take them down quickly. On top of that, the next pro is this song selection that the weapon we are using has. Of course, this may differ if you're using a different hunting horn, but this Rampage hunting horn we have with the attack melody 2 attached to it means that on top of self-improvement, we get tremor negation, which okay isn't the greatest, but it's still useful. But more importantly, we have attack and affinity up, increasing both our raw attack and getting us to almost 100% affinity. And on top of that, we also have sonic waves, adding even more damage when we play that specific melody. And the final pro is that this build can be used against pretty much any monster in the game, thanks to it being an elementalist build. That was the main goal of these Pre-Sunbreak builds, to create builds that can be used against any monster we may face at the start of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. And non-elemental builds means that we don't have to take into account monster weaknesses when it comes to their elemental and element resistances. But of course there are cons. One of the biggest cons for this build is its lack of defensive skills. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any evasion defensive skills, any skills like Evade Window or Divine Blessing, meaning that you have to be on the ball when it comes to avoiding attacks. Yes, we have the Dragon Heart bonuses, which adds resistances to our elemental resistances on this build, as well as the Valstrax armor having high defense, but nonetheless it's still a con for this build. And the other con is, unfortunately, we have to have 80% health or less in order to deal maximum damage. This is thanks to the Valstrax armor set, of course. But of course this can all be supplemented by changing the hunting horn. If you're not comfortable with having no defensive skills, use a hunting horn that has Divine Blessing or, like I said, Sonic Barrier, and you should be fine. But regardless of the pros and cons, this is still a very effective build at taking down monsters with the hunting horn. And it shows that the hunting horn should not be overlooked when it comes to dealing damage to monsters, making it the Pre-Sunbreak hunting horn build I'd recommend. But what are your thoughts? Please leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you a Pre-Sunbreak build for the Hunting Horn in Monster Hunter Rise. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.